as I stared at that spreadsheet. At the cold, hard, number $120,000 a question, echoed in the quiet of my apartment. Why? Why had I let this happen for so long? The answer? I realized. It was sitting right there in the psychology textbooks I used to read in college. In narcissistic family systems, there are always roles. My sister, Megan, was the golden child. She was the one who was perfect, talented, and worthy of investment. Everything she did was celebrated. And I was the scapegoat. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who took the blame and carried the burdens. I was the family shock absorber. And Megan, the golden child. I could do no wrong. I, the scapegoat. I could do no right. But it was more than just roles. It was a psychological trap. For 30 years, I was stuck in what therapists call a trauma bond. Confusing obligation with love. I was caught in the good daughter trap. I thought that if I just gave enough, fixed enough, paid enough, eventually, they would have to see me. They would have to love me. I realize now I had confused being needed with being loved. My money was my only ticket to family gatherings. My ability to pay was my entire identity. I wasn't a daughter. I was a utility. And now, the utility had just been shut off. The sun came up. And the chaos began. It started exactly how I expected it to. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister. Megan. Not. Hey. Are you okay? Not. Did something happen? Just. What? The fuck, Cheryl? My phone's cut off. You're seriously overreacting. I stared at the words. Overreacting. After 30 years of being their personal ATM? I was the one overreacting by finally closing the account. I didn't reply. An hour later, my phone rang. Mom. Brenda. I let it go to voicemail. The notification popped up immediately. Her voice wasn't sad. It wasn't apologetic. It was furious. Cheryl. You have created an absolute mess. I cannot believe your selfishness. You need to call me immediately and fix this. Fix this. The entitlement was so profound. It was almost impressive. They had just exiled me. And now they were demanding I continue to pay for their lifestyle. From outside the family walls, the shock wasn't that they'd done it. The shock was that they were genuinely surprised I'd stopped paying. They didn't even see the connection between their actions and my consequences. But the final straw, the thing that turned my cold clarity into steel, came around noon. My cousin sent me a screenshot. Mom had posted on Facebook. A picture of her and Megan. Smiling. Arms around each other. The caption, "It's so sad when some children forget who raised them and all the sacrifices a mother makes." The comment section was already filling up with sympathy. You're such a good mom. Brenda, sending you love. They'll realize what they lost one day. They weren't just cutting me out. They were painting me as the villain to the entire world. They were actively rewriting history to make me the abuser. That post wasn't a cry for help. It was a declaration of war. And it was the last piece of evidence I needed. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This wasn't about hurt feelings. This was a pattern of systematic financial exploitation. And now, public defamation. I didn't call her back. I didn't engage with Megan's texts. I called my old college roommate, Julia. She's a family law attorney now. And she's notoriously tough. Julia, I said. I have a situation. And I have a spreadsheet. I went to her office. I laid it all out. The monthly $2,500 allowance for Mom. The G-Wagon insurance. The emergency roof repair that magically became a new outdoor pergola. The Dubai and Bali trips for Megan's influencer brand. The final tally, $120,000. Julia didn't flinch. She just looked at the screenshot of the text from 1151 p.m. Cheryl. Mẹ và Megan đã đồng ý. Con không còn là một phần của gia đình này nữa. She looked up from the phone. Then at my spreadsheet. Well? She said. Her voice crisp and cold. They've just given us a gift. They've put it in writing that you are no longer family. Which means these gifts you've been sending. She smiled. But it didn't reach her eyes. They're no longer gifts. They're undocumented loans. And they've just officially defaulted? She turned to her computer, and her fingers started flying across the keyboard. What are you doing? I asked. I'm drafting a formal demand letter, she said. It will itemize every single dollar you sent them over the last 4 years. It will give them 30 days to arrange a repayment plan before we file a civil suit for the full amount. I watched her type. The anger I felt last night was hot and messy. This was cold. This was precise. This was accounting. This isn't a family argument anymore. Cheryl, Julia said, her eyes fixed on the screen. This is debt collection. She was right. I had been erased, and the person they erased was no longer bound by love, or guilt, or the good daughter trap. The person they erased was just a creditor, and she was here to collect. The demand letter went out, and then, for a few days, there was silence. A loud, heavy, panicked silence. But the call that changed everything didn't come from my mother. It came from Julia. Melaviere. And her tone wasn't tough or celebratory anymore. It was concerned. Cheryl, she said. I was doing a routine asset check on your mother and sister, just to see what assets we could target in the civil suit. And I found something. What is it? It's about your Grandma Judith's estate. Did you know her coastal cottage was sold 3 weeks ago? I felt the blood drain from my face. What? That's impossible. Grandma Judith loved that cottage. She left it to me. Are you sure? Cheryl, because the will that was filed with the probate court names Brenda and Megan as the sole beneficiaries. It was filed 6 months ago, right after her death. I couldn't breathe. Grandma Judith was the only person in my life who ever truly saw me. The only one who never asked for anything. Julia, that's not the real will. I hung up and made another call. This time to Mr. Harrison, Grandma Judith's lawyer for 40 years. When I told him my name, his voice was filled with relief. Cheryl, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for months. Your mother's number was the only one on file. And she kept telling me you were unavailable. I went to his office that afternoon. He sat me down in his quiet, leather-bound office and showed me the original will. The one he had, dated 3 years ago, when Grandma Judith was still sharp. It was just as I remembered. The coastal cottage, her investments, everything, left to me, her granddaughter, Cheryl. Then, he pulled out a second document, the new will, the one Brenda had filed. This was signed. Mr. Harrison said, 3 days before your grandmother passed. When? According to her medical records, she was on a continuous morphine drip. The signature was shaky, but it looked plausible enough to get past a hurried clerk. There's someone else you need to talk to, Mr. Harrison said, writing down a name. Denise? She was your grandmother's primary home care nurse. She contacted me after the funeral. She was suspicious. I met Denise at a small diner. She was a kind woman in her 50s, with sad, knowing eyes. Your grandmother was a wonderful woman, Denise said, clutching her coffee mug. But your mother and sister. I've been a nurse for 20 years, and I know when something's not right. What happened? I asked. Your mother always insisted on visiting when Mrs. Judith was at her most sedated. She'd always be asking about paperwork. I got worried. So, Denise took a deep breath. So I installed a nanny cam on the bookshelf. I had a feeling. She pulled out her phone. I saved the footage from the day that fake will was signed. I wanted to show the police, but I was scared. I didn't know who to trust. She turned the phone around and pressed play. My stomach turned to ice. The video was grainy. Dime stampet. There was my grandmother, Judith, lying motionless in her bed, clearly heavily sedated or unconscious. And there was my mother, Brenda, standing over here. My sister, Megan, and Ryan, Megan's influencer boyfriend. Brenda held a document. A will. She placed it on a clipboard. And then I watched, horrified, as Ryan took my grandmother's limp, lifeless hand. He put a pen in it, while my mother held the paper steady. Ryan moved my grandmother's hand like a puppet. Slowly, agonizingly, forging her signature onto the line. My sister, Megan, stood by the door, watching, guarding. I wasn't just dealing with greedy, ungrateful relatives. I wasn't just a creditor collecting a debt. I was the daughter of a criminal, and I had just found my evidence. The meeting to officially read the will was set for the following Tuesday at Mr. Frosting 1. Harrison's office. My mother, Brenda, and my sister, Megan, arrived like they were attending a coronation. They were dressed in expensive, somber-looking clothes, but they couldn't hide their smugness. They looked at me with a kind of rehearsed pity, as if I were a distant, unfortunate relative they were about to do a small kindness for. Mr. Harrison, playing his part perfectly, read the fake will, the one that left everything to my devoted daughter, Brenda, and my loving granddaughter, Megan. As he read, my mother actually reached across the polished mahogany table and patted my hand. "Don't you worry, sweetie," she whispered, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We'll make sure you get something. Maybe Grandma's old china." Megan just smirked. Mr. Harrison finished reading. "And that," he said, "concludes the reading of the will filed by Mrs. Brenda." He looked at me. That was my cue. "I'm afraid I have to contest this will," I said, my voice clear and steady. Brenda's face tightened. "Excuse me, Cheryl. This isn't the time for your drama." "On what grounds their lawyer?" A man who looked like he'd been paid in cash finally spoke. "On the grounds of forgery, conspiracy, and elder abuse." As if on cue, the conference room door opened. Milavier, Julia, walked in, followed by a severe-looking woman carrying a briefcase. "This is Dr. Alistair," Julia said, "a forensic handwriting expert." Dr. Alistair laid out her findings with surgical precision. The signature on the fake will did not match any of Grandma Judith's known signatures from the last 5 years. The pen pressure was wrong. The loops and formations were too steady for someone with advanced arthritis. Brenda was already starting to bluster. "This is absurd. My mother signed that she wanted us to have it." "Are you sure?" I asked, standing up. "Are you sure she was able to sign it?" I walked to the large conference room TV and connected Denise's phone. "What is this?" Megan snapped, her influencer voice suddenly shrill. "You can't do this." "It's called a nanny cam," I said, and I hit play. The room went silent. The grainy video filled the screen. There was Grandma, unconscious. There was Ryan, Megan's boyfriend, holding her hand like a puppet. There was Brenda, holding the paper steady. There was Megan, guarding the door. The color drained from their faces. Brenda let out a sound, a choked half scream. Megan immediately, instinctively, turned on Ryan. You made us do this. This was your idea." Their lawyer was already packing his briefcase. "My clients have nothing further to say." "They certainly don't," said a new voice. The door opened again. This time, it was a detective from the Elder Fraud Division. I'd spent the last 2 days with him. "Brenda, Megan, and Ryan," the detective said, his voice bored, as if he'd seen this 100 times. "You are all under arrest for elder abuse, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The room exploded. Brenda lunged at me, screaming, "You did this, you ungrateful bitch. You did this to your own mother." The detective simply put a hand on her shoulder and guided her, still shrieking, toward the door. But it wasn't over. They were out on bail 2 days later. And in the most predictable move of all time, they doubled down. They were still the victims. I was the vindictive, jealous daughter who was trying to steal their inheritance. To prove it, they organized a memorial service for Grandma Judith, inviting the entire extended family to the coastal cottage, the very property that was now frozen as a crime scene. They were going to publicly shame me. I arrived. Brenda saw me walking up the lawn, and her face contorted with rage. "Get her out of here!" she screamed at my uncles. "She is not welcome. She is the one who did this to us." "She's the one who did what?" "Brenda, A woman walked up the path behind me. It was my Aunt Sandra, my mother's estranged sister, whom I'd called the day before. Brenda froze. Sandra, what? What are you doing here? I heard you were pulling your old tricks, Sandra said, her voice carrying across the silent lawn. You did this to our father, too, didn't you? Brenda forged his signature on the deed to his house. My mother was speechless. And now you're doing it to your own daughter. As Brenda sputtered, trying to form a lie, I stepped forward. She didn't just do it to me, Aunt Sandra. She did it to Grandma. I pulled out my phone and hit play on the last piece of evidence. It wasn't a video. It was a voicemail. A shaky, terrified voicemail that Grandma Judith had left me a week before she died. A message I'd saved but never understood until now. Her frail voice filled the air. Cheryl. Baby. Don't trust your mother. Please. She keeps bringing papers. So many papers. I'm scared. Baby. I don't know what I'm signing. The gathered family stood in stunned silence. The truth was just hanging there. Undeniable. In my grandmother's own terrified voice. Brenda's mask didn't just crack. It shattered. And right on cue, 2 police cars pulled up the driveway. I'd informed them that the subjects of a felony investigation were actively trespassing on a frozen asset. As the officers walked toward my mother and sister, and their faces white with the realization that there were no more lies to tell, I just stood back. They were arrested again. This time, for violating their bail. This time, in front of everyone. After that day at the cottage, the rest was just procedure. The legal fallout was fast and brutal. With the nanny cam footage, Grandma Judith's voicemail, and Aunt Sandra's testimony of a previous pattern of fraud, my mother didn't have a defense. She was a serial scammer. Brenda and Megan were both convicted. My mother got a significant sentence for fraud and elder abuse. Megan got less. But still, jail time. Ryan, in a last-ditch effort to save himself, testified against them both and got a reduced sentence. The coastal cottage was legally, finally, returned to me. I spent the first weekend there. Alone. I sat on the porch, looking out at the ocean that Grandma Judith had loved so much. I opened my laptop one last time and pulled up that old spreadsheet, the scapegoat's ledger. I stared at the final number, $120,000. I thought about the cost, the years of anxiety, the missed opportunities, the constant, grinding feeling of not being enough. Then, I took a deep breath of the salt air, and I hit delete. The file disappeared. The ledger was closed. That night, for the first time in 30 years, I slept all the way through until morning. 6 months have passed. I sold the coastal cottage. It held too many memories of her, but also too many of them. I took every penny from that sale, and every penny I'd recovered from my mother's assets, and I started something new. It's called the Judith Project. It's a legal defense fund. We provide pro bono lawyers for families like mine, who are fighting elder financial abuse. We help them find the evidence, navigate the courts, and get justice for the people they love. That text message I received at 1:1 p.m. wasn't an ending. It wasn't an exile. It was an emancipation.